Hi guys, welcome to our webinar. Today we are here with Nate Ridgway. Hi Nate.
Hi, how are you?
He's the co-author of the book Don't Ditch That Tech. He's also a world history teacher from Indiana. And we are here to talk about a guidebook, an ebook that Nate wrote, and we are publishing it online with Classtime. So we're going through some questions here. Nate's gonna talk a little bit about the book. And if you have any questions, if you want to comment something, just please leave below in the whatever channel that you are watching us. Okay, let's go.
All right, let's do it.
Okay, so what are some typical challenges that teachers face in the digital world?
Oh man, there's so many. That's the thing, right? I think that for a lot of teachers, especially with this book, which is designed for beginning teachers who are just kind of starting to hit ed tech for the first time, I think one of the biggest challenges is that simply not knowing where to start. One of my co-authors and colleagues that I know really well, he says that overwhelming is not the problem of too many options. Overwhelming is the problem of not knowing where to begin, which is like, I think it is. So I think there's something to that. It's hard to know where to begin with things, because simply we do have so many tools at our fingertips, right? We have Microsoft, we have Google, we have all these different suites of apps and things that can do all these things. And it's hard to know where to get going. I think that's the first one. I think the second one also is simply access to devices, and then also the things that actually allow devices to work in the classroom, whether that's access to Wi-Fi or the fact that your students have devices that work consistently, and things of that nature. I think then the last thing that kind of goes along with this, but in some ways it's the most important, is actually, okay, so you've got this tool that's technology that you can make use of, but it still has to be backed up by good sound pedagogy that is research-based and is actually workable for you and your students. And no, just simply having the tools and the capability to work doesn't mean that you actually understand how, why, and when they should be used. And so I would say those are kind of be the big three that I would point people to.
Big challenge. So then how does your guidebook help with those challenges? Because it was completely focused on that, right? To help the teachers.
Yeah. So when I was originally writing this, I really wanted to start with like just the basic framework, right? And this is kind of the whole feature of part one, is it talks about the fact that there are no really hard and fast rules with using EdTech in your classroom. There's just some kind of like general themes and guidelines you can kind of stick to that can kind of give you advice along the way. Once you kind of understand framework and the framework of it and foundationally where you would like to go with things, then it's time to kind of start looking at like, what is my own personal device capable of? So things, for example, like if you have, let's say, a classroom of iPads at your disposal, right? The advice that I would give you in my super extensive 7 years of teaching is that I would tell you, look for things that are very tangible and very, very kind of, especially like movement kind of modality, right? iPads are so good about integrating touch and the actual movement of things around on a screen, especially with hands. On the other hand, though, they're really, really bad if you want students to do any kind of like hard word typing, right? Because using a keyboard on an iPad is kind of difficult. It takes a lot of practice. On the other hand, if you have a bunch of Chromebooks at your disposal, your classroom is going to look a lot different, and you're going to have to make decisions that also are going to then maybe you need to start looking at Chrome apps that work better for your students as opposed to ones that are Microsoft. From there, then that kind of gets me onto the third part, which is the third chapter of the book, which is more about like actually building your own toolkit of apps. And this takes time, and it takes a lot of experimentation. And really, it's kind of like thinking like, okay, so if I can start off with 2 tools in my classroom that I use, and for me, one of those is Classtime, and I've loved it now. I'm using it for 3 years, 4 years. Finding some particular app that really works for you in your niche, and then building your skills inside of that is really, really important. It's more important to use a few apps really, really well rather than a whole ton of apps really, really poorly. And then the last thing I would tell people to think about is that, and this is kind of section 4, is that things are going to go wrong with technology. Just be ready for it to happen. Some link that you're going to send out is not going to share correctly, or you're going to give the wrong edit permissions, or like it happened to me a couple weeks ago here. The Wi-Fi is just going to completely crash one day in your classroom, and you're going to have to be ready for things to go awry. And I will say, kind of on that model of things, being ready to fail very fast, there's this kind of like this fail fast mentality, is actually really important, because you learn more, at least I do as an educator, when things go wrong sometimes than I do when things go correctly. And so reaching out, and especially I give some links in here in this book to Twitter, and some different kind of hashtags you can follow and educators you can follow. There are some immensely talented people out there who are really good at doing things with technology that you can learn from. And so I would always encourage people, whether it's Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, there is something out there that can help you continue to grow as an educator using technology.
Okay. And then we have this question about like, who is this guidebook for, right? Who needs to read it? Because we have a lot of teachers that are a bit skeptical about technology and everything.
Yeah.
So who did you visualize when you're like writing this guidebook?
For me, when we like, I sat down, because I'd actually done for those who don't know, the book that I co-authored, which is somewhere there it is, it's up in the top left. Yeah. When I sat down with my mom and who's my co-author, and Matt Miller, who's my other co-author, and we were doing this, as soon as the book published, I was like, well, I'd really like to more kind of expand on this idea of educators who are brand new to ed tech, and that's really who this guidebook is for. That being said, tech hesitancy is a real thing, and I think there are some very valid opinions to all of a sudden. You feel like if you're just going to start using ed tech in your classroom, it's going to go wonderfully or terribly. And I think we need to kind of take a moment, and really, that's what I was kind of trying to accomplish here, is like, look at some very small concrete things that you can do in your classroom that ed tech might be able to help you with, whether that's time saving or organization or getting your students engaged. That's kind of what I would recommend in terms of who reads it.
Okay, and then we have the last question. How much time and effort does it take to get started with your advice? So you're talking a little bit about like failing fast, right?
Yeah, I think my recommendation, we say this in the Don't Touch That Tech, like again and again and again, is poco a poco, start small, like really, really small. Because not only are you going to get overwhelmed if you try to do everything all at once, but also your students are going to get overwhelmed too. A really good rule that I always aim for is don't try to teach either yourself or your students new content and the skill of using the piece of ed tech at the same time. You can do one of those things, but you can't do both, because what's going to happen is, like, let's say, for example, I'm teaching, I don't know, the Columbian Exchange or something like that, right? And I try to use a brand new piece of technology to teach that at the exact same time. My students are probably going to struggle, not just because maybe the content might be brand new to them, but because they've never used the tool in and of itself. And so that instead of helping you there, it just becomes a barrier. So my recommendation is to start really, really small. Try something, in a class period that takes 10 minutes, and try it in one block, and think of it as like a guinea pig. Like, I'm going to experiment and see how this goes. And if it works, I'm going to try it again. Maybe I might, make a few modifications, and I go from there. So my recommendation is to start really tiny and build from there.
Yeah. Okay, I guess that's all. We have been scrolling the book here to show you guys. Do you have anything to add, Nate?
No, not at all.
No.
I appreciate your guys' time, and thanks for having me on.
Of course. And if you are interested, if you're watching this and you're interested in getting the book, a free copy, just leave the comment below. We'll send out to you. And I guess that's all for today. Oh, if you don't follow us in our community on Facebook, please do become a member. We have a lot of webinars there. And again, thank you so much, Nate, for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you. No, thank you again for having me.
Okay. And bye-bye,
All
everyone.
right. Bye.